Mrs. Winston, third grade class presents.
Hello and welcome to New York City Atheists, live on tape, brought to you by New York City Atheists Incorporated. I'm your host, Dennis Horvitz, the David Letterman of the Hopelessly Damned. Sex and drugs and rock and roll. That's a subject that some people look upon with trepidation, and others of us look upon with fond memories. We're going to deal with only one of those three topics today. We'll never know. And hopefully we'll get to the other two in other shows, but we probably have to show them later in the evening, if you know what I mean. Our guest today is Bob Costa, who was a New York City Atheist discovery. He has been attending our meetings, and we subsequently had him as a guest panelist on one of our sister shows, This Week in Atheism. Happened to be one of my favorite group of shows. It was basically a free-for-all, as I'm saying. In any case, he has been a teacher, and he is going to be discussing today basically the influence of religious ideas on sex and displays of the human body. And he'll answer the question, or ask the question, did pagans have more fun than Christians? He's got extensive teaching experience, having taught for 30 years. And so he's perfect for a New York City atheist because he's used to unruly audiences. So without further ado, let me introduce Bob Costa.
Now, this is all going to come together. We're getting the Jews and the Greeks meeting in this. This is beautiful. Incidentally, the Greeks have made the most beautiful coins ever. They're just astonished works of aesthetics. This is Antiochus IV Epiphanes. He has a big blowout. He's ruler. He has the empire after Alexander dies, and he's in control of what is Israel, Palestine, Jerusalem. The Greeks freaked out over circumcision. They regarded it like genital mutilation. You know, the way we talk about female circumcision as genital mutilation. The Greeks regarded circumcision that way. They were quite horrified by it. And on top of it, what really upset the religious Jews in Jerusalem and Israel was that Antiochus built gymnasia where naked men and boys performed. He built theaters, and this caused the Maccabean revolt. It is the first time where we get the clash between Hebraism and Hellenism, which is going to be with us till today. All right? Where we get one part of the population horrified by sexuality and display of the secular part. Actually, it goes on very much in Israel, I understand, between Haifa and Jerusalem. There was just a thing on NPR the other day about how there's this really intense hatred between the religious communities of Jerusalem and the highly secularized communities of Tel Aviv, you know, where they're partying all night. So, you know, this goes back at least to Antiochus. Now, we're moving ahead. We're not doing a whole history of civilization here, although it may sound like that. All right, we get to one of the great, as Jeffrey Desonquois used to say, I remember he came out of the tutorial once and he said, I wanted to tease him, so on the top of my essay, it was the Feast of the Conversion of St. Paul, I think January 28th. So I just put it on there to get Jeffrey's ire up. So he comes out of the back room and he says, you know, he said, St. Paul is one of the great enemies of mankind. I mean, maybe the greatest. And he said, you know, one of the worst passages in the Acts of the Apostles is when there's that storm at sea and St. Paul is on board. And you're just hoping the ship goes down. And they pray to their gods, and that stupid captain makes the decision to throw the cargo overboard and save Paul. One of the great turning points of history. Now, Caravaggio's great picture in Santa Maria del Popolo in Rome. What does he do? Paul, very fundamentally, is not a native Israelite. He's bicultural, bilingual, possibly bisexual, many people think, but we don't know. What really makes him able to transfer Judaism is he's not a native Jew. He speaks Greek and he had some Greek education. And therefore, he's going to transfer Judaism from a tribal cult into a Greek-style religion. What he's going to do is he's going to take this cult of the dying Messiah and translate it into the language of the Hellenistic dying gods, Dionysus, Apis, Osiris, the gods who rise and are resurrected. Jeffrey makes a brilliant remark in here from a viewpoint of materialist understanding. Makes a stunning, that one sentence people would kill for if they had thought of it. He says what Paul really did was transfer the ideological perspective of a Jewish Palestinian peasant, and he has a brilliant excursus on how as far as we can tell, Jesus always avoids going into Greek cities. Whenever there's a Greek city or a village on his way, he goes around it and stays in the Jewish countryside. And he said the genius, if you want to call it that, of Paul is to translate that Palestinian country view into the international world of the Greek Hellenistic mind and cities. Stunning observation. Okay. Incidentally, the best place to learn about Christianity is Bart Ehrman's books now. It's a really good, he's a stunning scholar. He has tapes and all his books. He's at Chapel Hill. He's head of the religious department. He's a very, very fine scholar. All right, now this is really extraordinary. This was up at the Metropolitan Museum for a few months. The Met unfortunately did not buy it. By an act of the Satan, it is now in Texas forever. Nothing. You know, I'm not really an American, I'm a New Yorker. All right. Everything west of the Hudson frightens me. So, there may be foreigners here, I know, I forgive you. Anyway, we could have had this here in the Met, and the Met blew it. Anyway, they did show it here. This is the first, apparently the first painting Michelangelo ever did at roughly the age of 13 or 14. They were conserving it. Now, look at this. Look at this, and then let's go back. Yep. Oh, how do I go back? To the left? How do I go back?
The other arrow facing the other direction.
The left.
Right there, facing through history.
Yes, left, the other left.
Where are we taking me there? No, 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 it's going forward.
Okay, then press this.
That's going forward.
Is that forward?
Yeah, it's forward. How do I go back?
This back. There you go.
Yeah, all right, we're not going to try to do that. Anyway, keep in mind the pictures we had of Praxiteles' nudes, where the body is conceived as healthy, athletic, normal. This is what Christianity does. All right? We are in another world where the body is the site of vermin, sickness, temptation, dirt, everything to be avoided so that we get the reward in some future, cloud where we're sitting hymning God. Now, look at this. This is one of the most important people in Western history you've never heard of, St. Anthony the Great of the Desert. He was basically a crazy, he was a lunatic, but he lived for 30 or 40 years in a cave in the Egyptian desert. And now, if you had said this to Plato or some guy in the gymnasium, they'd be like, this guy's nuts. Nobody in their right mind goes and lives in a cave and thinks that he's doing something virtuous. Covering himself with lice, thinking demons and Satan is tempting him with women, and this is a whole new ball game. All right? St. Anthony. All right? Wish he had never existed, but he did. Pachomius comes right now, he attracts quite an attention. He's like a medicine man. So other guys start to find their own caves around his cave. It becomes quite popular. I don't know if the rents were high, but each guy found his cave. Now Ron gets the bright idea, gee, maybe we should have a meal in common, getting a little lonely in the cave after 20, 30 years here, no television, no sauna, a little boring. No books, just fighting with the devils and the demons that I'm getting sent every day. All right, so they found what we call Cenobitic. Nice terms to try out at your next cocktail party. Ask anybody what they know about Eremitic versus Cenobitic monasticism. You won't get another invitation, but I'm used to that. All right. Eremitic monasticism means when you actually live on your own, like St. Anthony in your own cave. You're not a social animal. That got a little boring, so they invented, especially St. Benedict of Nursia in Italy. Italians are a little sanier, they like parties and wine. They decided to found cenobitic monasticism, where you live in more or less a common life, and he founds the Benedictines, which becomes the essential model of Western monasticism, which still has an enormous influence on us. Another book you've never heard of, which has an enormous influence on us, St. Athanasius, another horrible person, but anyway, he writes a life of St. Anthony, which for over 15, 16, 17 centuries, people regarded as one of the most important books to read. And what it was a hagiography, a sacred life of St. Anthony's life, and how you too should live a life like that. Now, we have come completely from the public world of the Greeks in the gymnasium, the theater, the polis, public events and celebrations, to this isolated, withdrawn world in which you morbidly think of your body as the site of sin. And how all day long, if you died, the nuns used to tell us, you better get absolution today, because if you walk across the street and a car hits you and you haven't been absolved, you'll go to hell. And you used to go in sweat all day long, whether you would, and they tell you all these little rituals. Well, before you die, you should just say the Hail Mary, and you should say this. And, you tell this to kids, it's poison. It's poison. All right. Now, 2 words here. Everybody know what asceticism is. Asceticism is the denial of the body and its pleasures in the idea that you are having some higher purpose. Way at Lent or something, or Ramadan, you don't eat all day because you're giving it up for your God. It's a sacrifice of the body. The opposite is me, that's hedonism. That's the pursuit of pleasure as a form of happiness. And we can debate the kinds of pleasures. And that's Michelangelo. All right. Now, none of this would have really mattered. It would have stayed in their caves in the desert. Except this guy comes along, Constantine, known as the Great. This is his famous statue in the Campidoglion in Rome. He becomes the first Christian emperor. We're going to tell you what that happened. His mother, St. Helena, was a barmaid, probably worse. If you want to, but they were all nut jobs. Their family, they murdered themselves left, right, and center. He murdered his son, their brothers, their nephews, their sisters. It was just unbelievable. If you want to read a good popular account, Jonathan Kirsch's God Against the Gods, The History of War Against Monotheism and Polytheism. He's a good journalist, and he's done his homework. It's a good retelling of the story. This is where it happened. None of you probably have seen the Milvian Bridge. I used to sit here and cry sometimes in Rome, thinking it all could have been different. This is the outskirts of Rome. There used to be a nice cafe there. I used to sit and get drunk sometimes. If he had only lost that battle. On October 28th in 312, there's a civil war going on, and the young Constantine is having a battle with this guy named Maxentius. Many years later, he tells, what's his name? Caesarea, he'll come to me in a minute, whatever his name was. He tells his biographer, Eusebius of Caesarea, that, before the battle, he looked up in the sun and he saw a cross. And under the cross it said in Greek, in tutoinika, in Latin, in hoc signo vinces, in this sign you shall conquer. Apparently he said to himself, if I win, I will at least honor the Christians. He wins the battle, unfortunately. That was the Tiber, incidentally. This is the wonderful painting in the Vatican by Giulio Romano, who was the pupil of Raphael. A few months later, he publishes one of the most important documents in Western history, the Edict of Milan. All right, what does he say? We have no copy of it. No copy has ever been found, which makes me suspicious. But anyway, we have 2 accounts in Eusebius and Lactantius, two Christians, in which he officially gives tolerance to all religions, but very dramatically starts funding Christianity and preferring it. Now, if you can get a job, and your job as incidentally, there was no priesthood in paganism. There was no fixed clergy. Like we have rabbis and Catholic priests who are for life. They didn't have that in the ancient world. So there was no clergy there, you know, that had a vested interest, all right? But when you start saying, hey, there's a big job over there in that church, if you want to run that church over there, somebody's going to come up and take that job. All right? Well, a lot of people came to take the job. Can I go back, Nick? Do I go back?
Page up.
Page up. Ah, oh, very good. So smart. All right. This is very important and very rarely observed. Every world religion gets spread by getting attached to an empire. Every great religion only becomes a world religion because some empire picks it up as their religion. Zoroastrianism gets attached to the Persian Empire and assassinates. Ashoka becomes a Buddhist and perpetrates Buddhism. The Chinese get Taoism and Confucianism. All the world's religion become world religions because they're really political ideologies of a particular empire. This is a stunning coin. If you have it in your basement, you probably could retire. This beautiful gold coin. And why this has so fascinated scholars, numismatists, and scholars of religion is that Constantine has this minted in the same year that he issues the Edict of Milan, saying that he's now, he doesn't say he's a Christian, but people have wondered whether he was sincere. He wasn't baptized until his deathbed. All right? So it had always been an issue. Was he sincere? Was he making a political move? Why did he become a Christian? Was he simply clever? And this is a particularly interesting piece of evidence because on this coin, he's portrayed with the sun god behind him, Sol Invictus, who was his favorite deity before he was a Christian, if he ever became a Christian. Sol Invictus means the unconquered sun. All right, so it's a very interesting piece of evidence. Now, one of my great heroes, Julian, known to the Christians as Julian the Apostate. How many of you know Julian the Apostate? Oh my God. All right. Get a statue today on your way home. All right. Julian only ruled for 3 years. He was a nephew of Constantine. He was raised a Christian, but was smart enough to realize this was nonsense. And when he became emperor at 20, he was a very brilliant philosopher already, a great student of Greek. And he begins to say, I'm not a Christian anymore. I'm not going to close the churches yet. Wish he had lived. But he begins to bring back the old religions and tolerates them. All right? If he had lived, we might be living in a different world. Unfortunately, at the age of 23, when he was campaigning against the Persians, he took a sword in the side, a spear, and apparently his last words, "O Galilean, you have conquered me." We don't know if that's true or not. Gibbon has a beautiful passage on him on how, if he had lived, we might be living in a saner world. The last pagan. Oh, Gore Vidal, who we saw in our first slide, he wrote a wonderful historical novel, Julian, which I read years and years and years ago when I was up at Hunter. It's a very positive portrayal of Julian and the world of this world when Christianity is taking over and what it's doing to the world. It's a beautiful book. And many of Julian's own writings quite remarkably survive. I can't believe the Christians didn't burn those. Maybe they were too interesting, or the monks needed something else or an extra on the side after the prayers. Now, another main turning point. Am I boring? Is this okay? Go on? Okay. Another central turning point is Theodosius, known as the Great, but Theodosius I. He does several things which change the world forever. All right? On February 27, 380, he proclaims Trinitarian Nicene Christianity the only allowed legal religion of the whole Roman Empire. All right? That was a stunning proclamation. It is no longer legal to be anything else, on pain of death. All right? He then, in 388, he ordered all the pagan temples closed and outlawed the old Roman religion. All right? You can't sacrifice in them. One of the consequences many of them fall into disuse. Some get taken over as churches. They become quarries, etc. A tremendous artistic catastrophe. All right? In 398, the last Olympic Games are held, the end of the nude guys. They had first been held in 776 BC. That was 1,169 years of the games to the gods. We don't know if there's no evidence that he ended them. He may just simply not funded the next one. In 391, he agreed with Ambrose. This is a very famous story that there was an altar of victory in the Roman Senate that had been there over 1,000 years as the symbol of the victory of Rome. And Ambrose, who's also a great villain, here he is in Van Dyck's beautiful picture there, holding Dionysius out of the Cathedral of Milan until he agrees to take out the altar of victory. He had a big fight with the last of the pagans over whether that statue of victory should stay in the Roman center, and finally Theodosius sides with Ambrose and orders it taken out. So Rome is definitely gone forever. Very moving. All right. Now here's one of the guys who's enormously, I have a weak spot for St. Jerome, I must say. I have this picture in my bedroom I look at St. Jerome. He's a fellow here, I don't know, I have sympathy for him. St. Jerome is Cardinal by El Greco, and St. Jerome by Caravaggio. Now you notice what's happened to pictures. You never had a Greek picture, or a Chinese picture, or a Hindu unless it was Durga, the goddess of death, with skull. All of a sudden, death becomes the focus of your life. And you have no idea that all day long people thought about dying. Life meant nothing. It was your death that validated you and was your goal. Therefore, why wash? Why go to the gym? Why go out and have a nice time? Because, this is meaningless. All right? So St. Jerome has had an enormous, great scholar. He's the first Christian to learn Hebrew. He supposedly beat the rabbi who taught him. And he translates both the Old and the New Testament into Latin, which becomes the official translation of the church for the next 16th, 17th century. He was a very, very brilliant man. Wrote, caves, and in their little monasteries with no, they were working with quills and soot ink and roaches crawling on their desk, and they just filled bookshelves with books. I guess we don't have TV and porn and stuff. They're all done. All right. Now, St. Jerome, we have his letters, which are absolutely fascinating. One of the most famous is his recurring nightmare. In this nightmare, St. Jerome wakes up in his dream, and he's going up to heaven, and he gets to the pearly gates, and he knocks at the door and opens up. He goes, well, here I am, guys, all that suffering in the cave for 20 years and writing the New and the Old Testament and all that stuff. Well, where's my reward? St. Peter said, St. Jerome in his nightmare said, what? What are you talking about? And St. Peter says to him, what's the problem? While you were supposed to be reading the Bible, under the desk you had all the Roman poets. All those dirty stories you were reading. And all that Cicero. Down below. And in the nightmare, every night in his cave, St. Jerome wakes up screaming that he has not been faithful enough to Christ. Now, this is an extremely, you can't see it, unfortunately, it's a little dark, but I think it embodies the tension which is totally new in Christian society. Everything is temptation. Notice as St. Jerome is writing there, thinking about his Christian duties, two very erotic little boy angels are standing by looking. No doubt street urchins that were picked up as models. Now clearly, Cavarozzi, whether he meant it or not, clearly those two little boy angels are tempting him sexually in a way. And he's not looking because he's too afraid to look. All right? This is unknown in pre-Christian world. We're in a different space. Oh, this is a maniac. All right. This is what's called St. John Chrysostom. Chrysostom means golden tongued. He's about as close as you could get to a proto-fascist as happens to be around. He was really crazy. He was a virulent anti-Semite, a virulent homophobe, a virulent everything. And he's revered to this day by the Orthodox. And in fact, this statue is from St. Patrick's, a few blocks away. All right, now, one of the many things he did, people don't talk about this, is how many Christian mobs there were. We're so focused on the Taliban as destructive, but they had nothing on the Christians. One of the many things that St. Chrysostom done, John Chrysostom, he led a Christian mob to tear down the greatest of all Greek temples, the temple to Artemis, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. They ripped it down. stone, but this was where Alexander the Great had been proclaimed the son of Zeus. And when I visited this, I remember sitting there, and I said, I'm going to see what's left of it. And I walked out from this little Turkish village I was in, very remote. And I'm walking, as the sun's coming down, I'm walking through these fields, literally frog ponds all around these frogs croaking. And when I get to the site of the greatest of all Greek temples, one column is standing, which has only been re-erected in modern times. And it's flooded with, as a frog pond. And this is what they did. I'm going to say something else. Oh, this is a fascinating woman. This is Hypatia or Hypatia in Greek. She is one of the, really, it should be in every textbook. She is the first known woman mathematician, a brilliant mathematician. She wrote essays and books on Diophantine equations, on Euclid. Her mother was the head of the library at Alexandria, Theon. She was a pagan. Michelangelo put this picture of her in the great picture of the School of Athens in the Stanze di Raffaello in the Vatican. There's a story that when one of the cardinals came by and asked Michelangelo to see the drafts of what he was going to put up there, and he saw this picture of a woman, and he said, what's a woman doing in there? And Raphael said, well, that's Hypatia, one of the great Platonic philosophers and mathematicians. And supposedly, I don't know how he left her in. Apparently, he left her in that one stupid story that he made it really the nephew of the Pope, but I don't think it looks like a woman. Maybe that was the nephew of the Pope. I don't know. You don't know what they were doing. All right, she's murdered.